All right. Looks like it's 2 o'clock here in the afternoon for us. So I'd like to thank you everyone for joining so early. And yeah, let's kick this off.
Yeah, so thank you, as I just said, everyone for joining. So today we're going to be talking about website redesign. So we're going to specifically be talking about the 5 phases for success. So before we do start, just a little bit of quick housekeeping. So do feel free to use the live transcription from Zoom. You'll also be sent these slides after the fact, so after the webinar as well, and those will have closed captioning. And we encourage questions of all kinds, so please do put them in the chat and in the Q&A box at any point, and we'll get to them at the end. So, of course, a quick introduction. So I am Kainas. My name is not international marketing, as it looks like it might be. So I'm Kainas. I'm the account manager for Australia and APAC.
And I'm Ada. I'm the director of sales for Asia.
Ada. So for today, so our quick agenda is we want to focus on some key indicators that you will need a website redesign in the first place, how to set a budget, some timeline and expectations for the redesign, the 5 phases of success with your website redesign, and some best practices to consider. And then again, at the end, we'll have some Q&A. Cool. So just a quick pulse check to make sure we're all still here, that we haven't dipped away in the first 1 minute. So have you ever done a website redesign? So maybe you have and it was successful, maybe you have and it was a bit painful, or maybe you're planning to and you just haven't done it yet. You can also feel free to share in the chat your experiences around a redesign. Oh yeah, Ryan says yes, and they loved it. Oh, glad to hear that. We'll just give everyone a few minutes.
It's very good to see that the majority found it really successful. I was kind of hoping it would be more painful for most of them.
Successful, but also painful. Fair enough,
Yeah.
Michelle, fair enough. And Jared saying, yep, it's exciting and painful at the same time. That seems to be the general consensus today. Cassandra is saying, hasn't been done since before she was at the company, but there were things not in scope from that time that are still causing them pain. Yeah, definitely. Veronique says, enjoyed it, but the change process is painful for some stakeholders.
Absolutely. Cool. It looks like we've got the majority of participants that have responded, and yeah, we've got 39%. Yes, it was successful, 24% and it was painful, and 35% that they're still planning to. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, most people hate change, as Don says. Sure. What is website redesign? Ada, do you want to take?
Yeah, I would like to talk to you about what a website redesign is. I think we all know the definition. I think we all know that it has that we as a team have a lot of work to do during a redesign. Basically, it involves a big overhaul of your website. It involves changing elements like the code, your content, potentially your structure, user experience, and the visuals. It can be as small as a fresh coat of paint for your website. It can be a complete starting from scratch redesign. So, but essentially what we're doing this for is to make the lives of our visitors and prospects better and provide them the best experience on the website. So usually what happens during the design is we're kind of restructuring and reevaluating the existing content and layouts and colors and fonts and navigation. So with knowing that, we're going to go and try and optimize the site speed and make sure that the SEO is optimized, and also switching more to a responsive web design that is helping all sorts of our customers to come in and have a personalized experience. There are some key indicators that why you need a redesign or that you need a redesign. Look, sometimes it's very easy to do so by looking at a website and thinking, okay, this looks outdated. We probably should do a redesign. But there are some reasons to undergo a redesign, specifically for those websites that have poor user experience and basically which can mean many different things, as broken journeys or things that just don't add up logically when we take them through a particular journey. And that's basically for us to improve the user experience, is the ultimate goal here. Low SEO ranking is another reason, and that's to do with pretty much little or no traffic coming to our website, which is another reason to go and redesign the website. And low conversion rates, obviously very much correlating with the low SEO ranking. Because of low traffic, there might be also low conversion rates, or we might have a lot of traffic and still low conversion rates, which means there's something wrong in the user journey from the initial discovery to the finally getting someone to click on the CTA button to convert. And that could be also due to outdated content, broken links. It could be due to pages that don't go anywhere. I think we've all experienced it, and those are a few of the reasons where you can spot on your website to do a redesign. But before you start a redesign, I think it's very important that we identify the most important pages on your website. I think all of you here know exactly, or maybe at least your top 20, top 50 important pages on your website, the ones that require an action, whether that's a contact us or to buy a particular product, or those that are highly visited because you've been looking through your Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics dashboard. But the reason why it's really important is because we need to kind of then go and understand the different personas that we have that come to our website. It's not the same person. We've got people whose English is a second language. We've got people who may have a disability, whether that's visual, hearing, or a minor disability. We would need then to kind of map out the current user journey on your website, and then also picture the ideal one that you would like to have in the future. And of course, make sure that your internal stakeholders are aware of this. They could be impacted when we're working on the website. It's multiple departments that may get affected. So for some, it might be beneficial. For others, they might not necessarily want to go with this. So it's really important to understand the impacts and who gets to benefit the most out of it before this redesign. Now, in order for us to prepare to migrate and refresh and redesign, those are really multiple processes. That what we can do is when you're going through a redesign or a small refresh or a migration, you would always want to work with third-party vendors, agencies, developers, copywriters potentially, and it's really time-consuming. So we want to make sure that the teams and the vendors are aligned on the expectations and accountability on who's responsible for what. There will be content auditing, testing, measuring the ROI. These are the most important and time-consuming duties, so make sure you get them first. That's kind of your first thing that you're supposed to do. And then we also need to evaluate the aspects of your website to really determine the scope. We've had someone just in the chat saying that it wasn't part of the scope or wish to see more. It is really important, and it's really difficult to incorporate it all under that scope. But at the same time, we should get all of the ideas written down so that we can potentially choose which ones we want to be included under scope. Because after the redesign is done, typically it's a little bit too late to come up with something new that you want to improve. It's going to be a separate project. It's usually really hard to fit it in once the redesign is already finished. So we suggest to use a website auditing tool or scanner to tackle those issues before a redesign, because then we could actually make sure that we've included everything in the scope that we wanted to and haven't forgotten, let's just say, a very important, I guess, improvement that we didn't think of back then. And we would like to also suggest that you communicate the high-level understanding of the website redesign process. I think it needs to be a checklist of what needs to be done during each phase, specific deadlines, set the goals for each team so that we can work on it together in a timely manner.
Peter? We also want to talk about the budget, timelines, and expectations. So what's behind this website redesign? What do we need for it? So some key budget components are design. So redesigning a website is, of course, an extremely resource-heavy task. You need to map out the creative direction of the project, any visual designers, UX. Is it going to be in-house? Are you going to outsource anything? And you need to keep in mind that it is an investment. You know, you're basically balancing the time that your team will spend on the redesign, as well as the cost of maybe outsourcing it and letting your team spend time in other tasks. Project management is another one. So of course, we shouldn't underestimate it as a time resource as part of the redesign process. You know, you need to make sure that everything's going smoothly. You need to make sure that you have some key timelines in place. So you know, okay, we need to get this done at this point and ideally this done at this point. So it's not just one big chunk with an end launch date as well. Content. So there's no doubt that content was one of the most important aspects. It's what your site visitors will be engaging with the most. It's not just about what it says, but also about what it says about your organization's brand, you know, how the words and photos match well together as well. And you need to make sure that you take into account the content on your website, not just in terms of with the redesign, any past and outdated content, but also with the future as well. So what sort of brand direction would you like to go with the new website? Development as well. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about what the size of our website is, what CMS it is on, everything from the back-end sort of development of the site itself through the redesign. We need to factor that into our budget. You know, do we need anything new? Do we need any new tools or anything like that to build the site itself? And of course, functionality. So what functions does your website have to have? You know, what is the main point of it? Is it for information, like for a government organization? Is it to get donations and spread information, like for a not-for-profit organization? Is it financial? Is it e-commerce? Are you trying to sell something? What do you want your users to interact and engage with? What's the function of it? And how do we build our site to match that function for our users? Yeah, we've got also a couple of timeline milestones. So for instance, you need to have, as mentioned, some clear timelines around this website redesign. You know, if it's going to take 1 year, what are your sort of 1 month goals? What are your 2 month goals? What are your Q3 goals and such? So we want to have a timeline for research and discovery, make sure that this is a very important phase and you don't just skip over it in the excitement of jumping into your redesign, although I can understand the excitement around it as well. So we want to make sure we're doing our research beforehand and then making some preparations for it and some planning as well. And then we get to the execution. Okay, what do we actually need to do for the redesign? How do we execute it? What do we need? What in our planning stages have we missed, for example? So planning, and then of course the testing, so the user testing, and then the final launch of the site as well, and being able to track those metrics of how it's performing. This also goes with expectation setting. So sometimes we have a plan that doesn't exactly always go to plan. So we need to manage our expectations and have them be very concrete if possible. Your expectations, if you're building the website, might be different to your manager's expectations, might be different to your office's expectations, might be different to your stakeholders' expectations as well. So you need to have some clear communication and make sure that all of your goals are SMART, if we all remember SMART from back in the day as well, from any sort of interviews that we've been to. So we want to make sure our goals and objectives are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and also time-based.
So just don't feel to raise their hand if you guys could put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. We can address them at the end of the call. Thank you. I'll continue with the 5 phases for success with your website redesign. And the first one we're going to talk about is the website audit. Typically, a website audit comes in when organizations do a redesign and they would hire consultants or someone to kind of come in and audit the website. We also have internal teams that would manually look through the entire website and do that. It's great. It's a good approach if you have maybe 200, 300 pages on your website. It does not work for larger websites typically. So it's really important to audit how your website is currently performing or what the status quo is and what needs improvement. It's really important that you talk to your other departments within the business and stakeholders to understand what they would like to see in a website redesign and how it could help their KPIs and goals to reach them. And also conduct interviews to understand how external stakeholders use your website as well. It could be anyone that maybe could be basically your family member or your neighbor or your colleague as well. So let's talk about research and discovery. So there's a few elements of your website that should be reviewed, and one of them is the content management system. Typically, we hear a lot of questions from our customers and prospects on what are some of the suggestions for a good CMS. And we basically would say, well, it really depends on you. We have the open source CMSs, including WordPress and Drupal, and they may be suitable for some, but not suitable for regulatory organizations, including banks and finance, because it just simply isn't secure enough for them. We have seen a rise of easy-to-use CMSs like Sitefinity, where we could drag and drop templates and boxes, and it makes it a lot easier for everyone to use it. And then also at the higher end, we have CMSs like Sitecore and Adobe Experience Manager, which we see often being implemented at organizations who are not quite ready for such a sophisticated CMS, and it takes the team quite a bit of time to get used to it and to use it. So keep that in mind if you're going to redesign and also move to another CMS. It can be quite a slow process. The visual design should be reviewed. We are seeing more websites with videos and product demos and testimonials and a search bar and voice to command functionality. So I think all of that, the trends I keep changing. So it's a great way to do that as well during the redesign. Content is obviously a big one. We hardly see anyone who starts completely from scratch, but if that's your goal, you'll have to pretty much scratch all of your outdated content. But those that are not, they would have to choose whether they want to migrate some of the existing content and basically build on top of that. SEO, as we mentioned before, that should be always reviewed. It's one of the bigger reasons why people do redesign. Competitive analysis of how you compare with with others in the same industry. Accessibility, web accessibility, we've talked a lot about this last year. Me and Kainet have always kind of stressed that web accessibility should be there for people with disabilities, should be a mobile-friendly design as well. All of your pages should be optimized for a mobile phone. Website speed is another important one, as it's been more and more stressed for those that have maybe a 3-second threshold of patience for visiting a website. And of course, security, very big topic since last year. So we want to make sure that the website is secure and protects all of the personal identifiable information that we often leave pretty much everywhere these days.
We want to talk also about phase 2, so budgeting and redesign strategy. So in terms of budget and resources, you need to sort of align with your goals. It's a great time to review what you currently have, what kind of resources you have, evaluate the resources and understand the gaps. So do you need any additional resources, knowledge, or tools to achieve your accessibility goals, for example? Does anyone in your team need extra training? Do you need extra tools itself? Timeline as well. So this comes also into sort of setting a realistic budget and timeline based on the resources that you do have. If you have a smaller organization, you might need a little bit more time because you might not have as many resources on hand to sort of speed up the process of a redesign. If you have a larger organization, maybe you have a lot more content, but maybe you have a lot more access to resources and tools and hands to sort of have a shorter redesign timeline as well. And then, of course, a redesign strategy. So you need to identify what standards you're trying to comply with, what exactly are you trying to change with the redesign itself. So having those clear metrics of these are the goals we want to achieve, and this is the strategy for how to achieve it. So we want to consider, for example, accessibility, as Ada just mentioned. Really great time during a redesign to really get into the nitty-gritty and sort of look into accessibility as part of the strategy for the website moving forward. So how do we add it to our budget and strategy? So what will adding it do? It will save you some resources in the planning process itself. It can ease up your testing process for some various users. Spare you the cost of non-compliance, so making sure that you adhere to accessibility, so the WCAG guidelines, making sure that you're not under scrutiny for being non-compliant, and ensuring that your conversion is set for success. So making sure that your website is accessible to everyone, regardless of if they need assistive devices, regardless of what device they are using, making sure that you are opening the door to everyone to be able to engage with your content.
When you're incorporating accessibility, it's good to focus on fixing the errors identified during an audit. And when you do that, there's certain issues that are confirmed according to WCAG. So those ones that are the low-hanging fruit, that's something that we would need to fix first and establish new processes to maintain the accessibility. It's not something that you can audit once, fix it once, and that's it. It will be a continuous effort as we add and change and update new pages. And it's also really good to educate and communicate the benefits of website accessibility, having workshops with your internal stakeholders, with your teams, and educating them on why it's really important and why it should be part of your website redesign. And then probably the most exciting stage is phase 4, testing and launch. It's really important to run a pre-launch audit, just because we would need to understand if there's any issues before we go live, and automation tools can definitely help spot all these potential errors and make sure that we go live error-free. And we will also share with you a pre-launch checklist and some things to consider before what we need to do during that pre-launch audit. And also maybe the second part is to get someone to test it out for you. So real human experience, there's far more superior to go through the user experience and the design and make sure that everything is smooth and is logical. So include a broad spectrum of users. Again, make sure that some may maybe more senior citizens, as well as those who use assistive technology, those that might be colorblind as well, dyslexic, could be really multiple people to test it out and give you that feedback as well. Some of those essentials that I mentioned in my previous slide as a checklist, it's making sure that all your CTA buttons have links assigned to them. I frequently see that when I click on something, it just goes to an empty page and I get really frustrated. I kind of wish it was just a broken link, and then I would be disappointed and close my window, but sometimes it goes to nothing and I'm just not sure if it's my loading issue or if there's actually nothing on there. So that's one thing. We also want to make sure that all pages have optimized title tags and meta descriptions. So ideally, just like a college essay, all of your pages should have a title and then your headers. The headers are really just visually pleasing, also explaining what else we can expect on the page. Kind of like to see, especially if you have a lot of information on that one page, then those make a really big difference. All images should have an alt text, or for decorative images, it should have a null alt text sign. This is a way for Google to cache your images. That's one. And two, it will serve people with disabilities, specifically visual disability, to be able to see and understand that there is an image and what the image is about. Test the website's navigation. For example, again, from personal experience, I hate it when you go to a website and you see a navigation bar with no description. You click on it, then it takes you to the options, and then you click on one option, and then it opens up another window to another option and another option. And if I move my mouse just a tiny bit, my choice is erased for me and I have to start over again. And I think that's, from personal experience, it's the worst type of a journey where you have to go and drop down menus, when you have to go and find a navigation bar. It looks really nice aesthetically, but at the same time, the purpose just isn't there. So we want to make sure that the navigation bar makes sense for everyone. And also updating all the URLs on the new website, making sure that they don't say test or beta or UAT. So we want to make sure that all of these URLs are updated correctly.
And of course, finally, we come to actually going live with the redesign. So this will be phase 5. So just like how before the redesign process starts before you even start executing the redesign with the planning stages, you need to also factor in the time after the launch. So don't neglect the data that you can get from the return on investment, essentially. So making sure that we are monitoring post-launch website traffic. So what is the strategy that you will have in place before the site actually launches to keep track of this? You don't want to miss out on any of those additional metrics by starting to track any of these user journeys or any of this data like 2 months after the launch. You want to sort of figure out any post-launch SEO implications. So what sort of external content, what content is consistent? Do you have a strategy in place for how you want your site visitors to interact with the content, and how do you track how they are interacting with the content? Of course, the point of the website redesign is to have a lovely new website for everyone to visit and everyone to have a good experience with, but how do you make sure that they're actually having that good experience, and how do you track that you've done exactly what you set out to do and you've done a good job by yourself? So also, if a significant amount of like rebranding has occurred during the redesign, this is a very common one. We might see branding and style colors, fonts, brand names very often with mergers and with name changes and such. Making sure that we don't have any outdated branding on the new website as well is very, very important to ensure that consistency and to prevent any confusion from coming to any of your site visitors, and to make sure that we are tracking well and being optimized for Google and for other search engines also.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kailas. I think I've seen this a lot where our customers would say, hey, we're going to do a redesign and all of our issues will magically disappear, which isn't the case. It's funny enough that a lot of us heard or experienced where, you know, the wrong alt text were attached to all the images, meta descriptions disappear, or all of the tags, the H1 tags suddenly became blank, and then the team would have to go manually and fill that all back out. But it's always, when you go live, there's always some things that are due to happen. Ideally, wouldn't want to see any of those issues again, but unfortunately they do happen, and that's why it's a caveat. It's not going to be perfect, but at least we can go and fix it. So in terms of the website redesign, there are some best practices to consider. We talk a lot about automation. It's not supposed to be a manual exercise. We don't want you to go manually eyeball every single page on your website or use 10 different tools to kind of compile the raw data and then figure it out yourself by seeking correlations or I guess meaningful patterns in there. So try and use automated tools, automated streamlined processes. You can launch much faster with fewer errors. And basically, as this webinar is sponsored by Monsido, obviously we're looking to automate audits for web accessibility, quality assurance, SEO performance, and content compliance, to make sure that, you know, as a way, once we redesign, it also becomes like an investment strategy or protection strategy, so that we don't have to redesign again. And as we invest so much resources and money and people into this project, we want to protect it as much as we can and continue monitoring the site's health. In terms of compliance with quality content, we would need to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of assets and content audits by looking at all of the different digital assets we have under the inventory, which is a digital stock take of all your assets. That will help us to understand what we currently have, what we can reuse, that so we don't need to start from scratch. Are the images outdated, or are our logos outdated? We could easily go and understand where we could find those and also replace it with something else with our new logo. Outdated content, I think I've seen so many websites just piling up content until they reach a database website that pretty much no one looks at because it's so outdated, underviewed, pretty much irrelevant, or plenty of errors because someone had a content team 10 years ago that just, you know, didn't really pay attention to proofreading. That is something that we want to review, something to get rid of. The leaner the website, the better. But of course, in this world of information, we completely understand that you have insights and blogs and information to share with us as visitors. Make sure your content complies with brand and content policies. Every organization has its own branding guidelines and policies that would either be regulatory or styling policies in terms of representing the brand as best without having a derogatory language or specific language, you know, offensive language towards nationalities, people of with different disabilities or even different religious beliefs. And of course, we would like to look at the accessibility guidelines that are stated under the W3C global framework.
We also want to make sure that we are being transparent and having visibility and communication across all teams that are responsible for the website redesign. This is beneficial, obviously, for accountability, making sure that we're tracking improvements with a reporting tool, but also is really good so that you're able to make those adjustments to the timeline if necessary. You know, if one team or if one task is taking a little longer than expected, you'd obviously need to adjust then other tasks and maybe the overall timeline and sort of start replanning and reconsidering and reconfiguring that process as well. So what is the strategy to help that team if they're struggling or if they're falling behind the expectation? And then, of course, scanning the staging site to identify errors that need to be fixed before the site does go live. Because, of course, as Ada said, redesign won't magically fix every single issue. It's very, very common for some issues to slip through the cracks. You know, anything from accessibility issues like alt text and tags not in the right places, or even a broken link or a misspelling or a missing CTA button, for example. And then, of course, auditing the staging environment, so implementing a scanning tool to scan the staging environment to obviously audit it before it goes live, catch any errors in advance, and making sure that you build accessibility into the website and into the website redesign itself, rather than retrofitting it in later, which would take a lot more work as well down the line.
We've got some resources to help you get started. There is a Monsido's redesign playbook. It basically is a piece of content, and all we did today is pretty much summarize all of that. But if you want more details, specific steps, and a lot more information, then definitely feel free to download this redesign. There are also some other resources, 7 simple SEO website redesign tips. We have some free tools on our website, including the quick check report, but it is also coming to your inbox. There will be an additional resource, which is the redesign checklist itself, so you can just go and tick those off as you go. It's time for another poll. We would love to help with any anything that, you know, based on what we did today, with any of your either upcoming redesigns, or if you would like to get a free scan of your website to understand the status quo of what it is today. The second option is a demo on how we can help you with the upcoming redesign. And then we have if you would like to understand a bit more about heat maps and also the performance module, which measures the page loading time to help you, that could benefit your redesign. And all the above is another option. So I'm just launching this poll now. So if any of you are interested, please do let us know. And if there's any questions, you can address them in the Q&A or in the chat, and we're more than happy to take them right now. No, nothing? No questions? I know this is supposed to go on for an hour, but me and Kaina is typically taking about half an hour, and then we have quite a bit of time for questions and answers. So I think we've got something in the chat.
So, thank you, everyone. So we do have a few questions that came in earlier that I saw. So Ryan and also Ashwini wanted to know if the presentation will be shared with you all. Yes, you should be receiving it in your inbox. I'm not sure when it will arrive in your inbox, but definitely within the next week or so. Usually within a few days, you'll get the whole recording with the closed captions as well. And then Michelle has asked, what is an example of a website scanner? So an auditing tool would be something like Monsido, which can, of course, scan for anything from quality assurance, so there's broken links and content issues, accessibility issues across the W3C guidelines, any sort of policies, any compliance issues, branding and style guidelines, you name it. But we'll be happy to chat with you in more detail if you'd like, Michelle. Ryan is asking, how did you afford your amazing New York City apartment? I think that's your background, Ada.
Oh, me, well, actually, I'm based in Sydney, and this is called, I believe, Hotel in New York background. If you go and type it in Google, you'll be able to sit in the exact apartment as I am.
Let's see, lots of people saying thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think John Yogel has said, thanks. I liked your comment about null alt text for decorative images. I had been looking for a solution whereby our underlying SharePoint technology does not allow us to provide alt text for decorative images in line with the W3 guidelines.
Interesting. Yeah, no, definitely. We're more than happy to reach out and see what we can do. Sometimes some CMSs are, and especially SharePoint, it's not a CMS per se. It's quite difficult to add certain custom fields, and I can imagine that adding a null text would be a little bit difficult as an alt text, but we're more than happy to have a better conversation around it.
Gerard has asked, any suggestions for tools to specifically support and streamline reviewing and assessing the quality and currency of the content itself? I'm not entirely sure what you mean, Gerard. But as always, we can definitely chat afterwards. Feel free to reach out to us or to our team for any questions after if we can't answer them today.
What other tips can we provide to you all?
Next 20 minutes.
I mean, we're probably the best people to ask because we look at 1,000 websites every day, and that's part of our job, one, and me personally as well. I just visit so many e-commerce websites on a daily basis, shopping websites, Bunnings, everything else that is available for me to do. I think the one thing that we forgot to mention is that when people come to the website and before you consider a redesign with the forms, there are some forms that are extremely long in format and we have to go and fill them in. And there's like drop down menus where we have to click. So this is not ideal for some of us because we would rather just give you a call. And instead of spending more money on customer support and supporting a call center, we would rather probably do things online and fill it in, but we don't want that. So keep that in mind, is to maybe keep the forms shorter and not have too many choices for us to make. I hate it when you open a drop down and it's like, this is the reason. I'm like, this is none of these reasons apply to me. So yeah, no, that would be great.
Oh, we've got a couple more questions that have popped in. So Ryan's asked, does Google take accessibility into account with their SEO rated ranking? Yes, actually, there are a lot of ways in which SEO and accessibility do sort of coincide and cross over. For example, so alt text, I know we've mentioned it a few times already, so that obviously is very useful for accessibility and making sure that screen readers understand what an image actually is. So it's reading out what the image is rather than just a link or a random assortment of numbers and letters and symbols. But that also does improve your ranking on Google and other browsers because it basically will read out those key terms and cause your web page to rank a lot higher. The same goes for a lot of other elements like H1, H2, headings and such like that. It's very useful for screen readers to be able to understand what portion of a page it's reading out, whether it's a heading or whether it's a main paragraph. For skip to content, it's really useful as well. For other sister technologies. And then of course, that also improves your ranking. So the more keywords you have in H1 or H2, for example, the higher the ranking.
I think definitely would look at when it's ranking and indexing the websites, would definitely look if it has a skip to content element or not. And if that is, it's automatically kind of put at the front of the search, just because it allows people to immediately go and navigate exactly where they need to be instead of reading it all out loud, basically.
Yep, so let me just scroll up. We've got a couple of great questions. So Sarah has asked, how do you start a review of one of those sprawling database sites with 1,000+ pages? Yes. So doing a manual review of 1,000+ pages, I can't even imagine how long that would take and how many people that would take to do. So there are a lot of automating auditing softwares that, like Monsido, that do basically handle 1,000+ websites on the daily, making sure that that it is basically auditing and reading through every single bit of content. So that would be a very good place to start to get basically a full audit of your whole website and understand exactly where the issues are and what the issues are and where to sort of start, which low-hanging fruit, any outdated content and the like.
There's a few ways to go about it. So if we're talking about a website that's over 1,000 pages, there's one way of going around and say, hey, I want to focus on my top 500 or top 200 most important pages, high traffic pages, and I'll start there. And I'll make sure that we keep them as it is, or we use, like, for example, heat maps to understand the engagement on those pages. And then we figure out whether we basically need to shorten the content, or if it's a visual matter, or if we, for example, need to add those sticky CTA buttons that basically follow you from head to the bottom, basically from top to bottom. So it's not just in the footer and the header. And the second type is, as you said, kind of, as we could start with the low hanging fruit and then kind of go into the not so relevant or interesting issues.
Yeah, thank you. So Shai has asked, what are the key things to keep in mind when doing a redesign for multi-site? So essentially several websites for different regions, territories, and countries. That is a great question, and it does depend on your own sort of organizational vision. So when there is time for a redesign, it's a great time to consider. So we hear a lot of our customers say that they are planning to maybe separate the sites into separate regions if it's been one site, or maybe they're planning to do the opposite and they're planning to bring it all together. So we want to make sure that we are checking for any duplicate content across the board. If we are bringing those sites into one site to be one main redesigned site, we want to make sure that we are obviously being considerate of the different regions and the different audiences that might come from that, how to track where your visitors are coming from. Do you get a lot more traffic for one region than another? And if so, maybe we might need to spend a little bit more effort on one than the other as part of our strategy and as part of our budgeting as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think from my experience working with Southeast Asia and specifically Singapore, where majority of the international or like even main headquarters are being moved to, we see teams there usually working on multiple websites, and it's 5 or 6, 11, depending on the entire region. And when they're going to go through a redesign, one, they have to consider what the headquarter in the US or in the UK want. And typically those are some really harsh rules that they have to follow, but at the same time they're trying to localize it, because Indonesia is very different from Singapore, Australia is very different compared to Hong Kong, for example. So basically we need to consider, and that's why we said that it's very important to meet with the departments and understanding what works for their market and trust their skills and knowledge about the local markets. And also prioritize your markets. Some of them might be emerging markets, so you're probably not going to start with those and focus more on the best performing brands, whether that's brands, best performing markets. And then you could start with one and test it out for one particular brand and market. And then if that works well, we could apply it to similar ones, and also later on for any of the emerging markets and websites.
Sarah has asked, is there an optimal number of pages for a high performing website? That is an interesting question and a very difficult one to answer. It does depend on what types of pages there are, and also the purpose of the website itself. So if it's a website where maybe it's a government website, for example, you need to have a lot of records and archives, you're going to have a larger website by default because you need those records and those archives to still be there for the public to see, essentially. If it's an e-commerce site, you might need a separate page for each product that's on the site.
Yeah.
But then again, there are a lot of other sites where you might want to have the smallest number of pages that get the point across as possible, because you don't want your audience getting lost in pages that aren't going to provide them as much benefit, or that aren't going to provide them as much insight as they would like, and making sure that a content is very streamlined. So it does depend on, I guess, the organization and the intended functionality of the website. So it's a very difficult question to answer.
If it helps, I mean, typically here at Monsido, we've got over 3,000 customers altogether. And basically, if we look at it on average, what the page counts are per website, we don't see typically anything less than 500 pages. And those are around the 500 to 1,000 page. We would see non-for-profits, we would see, and it also depends on the resource, right? If they only have one content editor that uploads content once a week, we're not going to have a large website by that time. So I see non-for-profits, I see councils, specific like Australia, New Zealand councils that wouldn't have too much and only the essential information for their citizens. Typically the councils within the government space, K-12 schools as well, they try to keep it as lean as possible, international schools as well. And then we have that mid-tier of around 2,000 to 5,000 pages, where we would have someone more like a university with all the different departments, e-commerce brands, or like, let's just say consumer electronics and household brands. We're not talking about marketplaces or like really large e-commerce places like eBay and things like that, but it's really more just one brand having all of these products. And then we see government agencies with a lot more, especially the Department of Immigration, who have a lot of documents and a document within a document and everything else. So that it's yeah, but if Sarah would like to discuss with us her specific organizations and what it's supposed to be compared to others, more than happy to help.
Yeah. And we've even come across some customers like even in the not-for-profit space where over the years, I think like Camp Quality, for example, over the years, they've ended up with a 7,000 page website, but there's a lot of duplicate content and it's just kind of sprawled out across multiple content editors coming and going over a large amount of years. And then they've had this website redesign and website strategy to then bring that down to just the essential pages and making sure there aren't any duplicate bits of content and making sure that it's very streamlined and very concise with the information that is there, so that again, the visitors aren't getting lost and that it's not unmanageable for one person, for a small team to manage as well.
I think we also during COVID, a lot of our customers were doing Zoom events and conferences and things like that. And each Zoom event would have a separate page for it. And obviously now that's a little bit irrelevant. So any of those outdated Zoom events and pages should be removed. So that's another thing to consider.
We've got a question from Darren Bryant. So can Monsido do an average reading level for a site? Yes. So Monsido can scan for the readability of a site. So if you have a specific goal for a readability level, whether that's a college level or a grade 7 level or anywhere in between, essentially, it can scan and track exactly which pages are primarily hitting college level and which pages are hitting a lower grade level. And so you'll be able to track the average reading level for the whole site as well and track where that is.
Yeah, and also to keep in mind with the readability, some of the content that you may have is going to be difficult to read, and there's no problem with that, absolutely. And those pages are typically terms and conditions, their disclaimers, their warranties, and things like that. It's just a lot of jargon, a lot of information on one document, and those are going to be difficult to read. So we could easily exclude them or just not even pay attention to them. But your most important pages, your product pages that require an action, or if you want to get someone's information or for them to buy something, ideally that's where we have to have 8 to 9 or 10 to 12 grade level, so that it's easy to read and easy to digest. What I hate the most is when there's academic language on websites. It's just like, okay, great to know that you're showing off and great to know about your writing style, but for someone like me whose English is not a first language, I find it really hard to read a long sentence and then having to go back and understand what it is. Typically, financial organizations, superannuation, sometimes government and universities with all their academics publishing their own work is usually difficult to read.
For sure, and that's a very good point as well. So there might be some pages that might skew the overall accessibility score. You might have, readability score. So you might have some pages that have not many words on them, so they're going to have a low readability level. Or you might have terms and conditions or privacy policies or, documents as well that might be government forms, or there might be very strict course titles as well that might sort of skew that readability score to be a bit of a higher level as well. So it's important to consider it not just as an overall average reading level for a site, but also considering it in terms of sections of your site as well.
I accidentally launched the poll again. If there is anyone else who would like to because maybe you've missed it in the beginning, so I just relaunched it again.
We've also got a question. Do you have any recommendations on how to do internal stakeholder engagement for a new site? We'll need their feedback, but we'll need to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, that's the hardest one, right? How do you enter another department and say, hey guys, we're doing a redesign. What do you want? No, I think it's I think there should be at least one team that is leading with the example and is going to make those decisions. So there is a yes or a no and what to incorporate. If we consider everything that everybody wants, we're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to get anywhere. So if we could, for example, create a champion group or a particular group from where we have a member from each of the teams to be as a representative, just like in the parliament or just like in the UN, that would help you to kind of understand and reach some sort of consensus. But of course, there shouldn't be just one team deciding for everything and then just letting all the departments be by themselves, basically.
For sure. And I think with that as well, so part of being a champion would also entail sort of showing why you need to do the redesign in the first place. So having that audit and being able to show that and present that to the stakeholders, and also being able to present your plan and your strategy for then overcoming those and sort of addressing those challenges and those issues with the existing site. We've got, so Gerard sort of added on, so sorry, I meant reporting that Monsido's tools might generate that would support someone doing a content review. So capturing things like reading age, so readability that we mentioned earlier as well, accessibility, page views, yep, 100%. So you can track for any accessibility sort of checks across the web content accessibility guidelines, so the WCAG, that W3C, who's the sort of global body that has these checklists as well. So you can scan across that for web and mobile. To see any accessibility issues and any improvements that can be made across your whole site. Page views, so tracking those analytics around page views for specific pages and overall as well. So which pages are receiving the most visitors and how do you sort of track that and how do you know where to maybe remove pages for your redesign if it's outdated, if no one's visiting it, or how to sort of refresh that content if no one's visiting it, and which pages to prioritize. So hopefully your homepage is getting the most views. And so that's obviously the first one you'd want to start with in terms of prioritizing it. And then reading age, yeah, so readability as well. Shai has also said, so what is the process of understanding if your website is compliant with regulations that protect personal health information and or personally identifying information?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Again, it would be pretty much impossible to do a manual audit across all of your pages, whether you have accidentally mentioned some personal identifiable information. So with Monsido's tool, we have the ability to find things like name, date of birth based on the format, right? So if we see something that looks remotely like a credit card number or an AWS credential or people's names, their age, that's how we then rank them by severity and show them to you in an audit view. So this is specifically really important for those that are regulated. Again, with financial organizations, they're lucky to have dedicated quality assurance teams and legal teams and make sure that none of that is available on the website, because it goes through almost 5 or 6 departments to verify before it goes online. But I guess not everyone has that luxury to do that. So if you're a healthcare provider and you have to follow the therapeutic goods regulation, I think it's called the Therapeutic Goods Administration regulations, there's no way to check that against particular checklist or anything. So we can run that scan for you and see if there is any violations in PDPA or GDPR or California Privacy Act for the US.
Yeah. And to add on to that as well, so it's not just a preset checklist. So you might have some industry specific or organizationally specific things that you want to make sure, any types of personally identifiable information that you want to make sure aren't on the site as well. So you can really customize your search as well around that. So that's also very important. So you're making sure that you're not missing anything. All right, so Ryan's got another question. So any advice on how to measure return on interest or return on investment if there isn't a specific product or service that is sold? Yes. So obviously a really great way to see an ROI is to see that the product or service is being sold. But beyond that as well, so you want to be able to track maybe using heat maps where your users are sort of navigating the site. So seeing who's using the site, how many people are using the site, where are they going, and being able to sort of track those metrics before and after the redesign is very useful to be able to understand that ROI. Are you getting more users clicking through to those CTA buttons? Are you getting more users clicking through to sign up to our newsletter or to learn more or to donate now or anything like that? So that's a really great way to see it. Any other kind of analytics as well is very useful for being able to track that. Just being able to track as well, so bounce rates as well. So making sure, so tracking those user journeys. If people initially were bouncing after 1 or 2 clicks, if they're staying a lot longer on average, that's a really great way to check and see that ROI as well, even if you're not necessarily selling something on your site.
I have nothing to add to that.
Okay.
That was actually pretty much what I wanted to say.
Okay. And time on page, maybe. Yeah. Good addition, Shay. That's also a really good way to track that metric. So how long are people actually staying on your site? So if they're staying on one web page for 5 minutes versus 2 minutes previously, or 10 seconds previously, or 1 hour, which might mean that they've walked away to make a dinner, but that also works. You're welcome, Ryan. You're welcome, Gerard, as well. Yeah, if there are any more questions, I've got a couple more minutes, then we're also happy to stay on a little longer with anyone if you do have any additional questions.
Cool. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. I hope you have a great the rest of the week. And yeah, we'll be speaking with some of you very soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.